What if the single most powerful career move, relationship upgrade, and social transformation you could make had nothing to do with your intelligence, your resume, or your work ethic, but everything to do with a 2-second pause before you smiled? There is a book that spent decades on international bestseller lists across 26 languages, endorsed by Larry King himself, and it does not teach you confidence through affirmations or networking through hustle. It teaches you something far more unsettling, something most people refuse to accept. The way other people experience you is almost entirely determined before you ever open your mouth. That author is Leil Lowndes, a communication consultant who spent decades training Fortune 500 executives, government agencies, and even the United States Peace Corps. Her work has been featured in Time Magazine, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and her conclusions are not flattering to the average person. Most of us are broadcasting social signals we cannot see, signals that quietly push people away, undercut our authority, and leak insecurity into every handshake and hello. In this masterclass, we are going deep into every pillar of our system, so you leave armed with the exact psychological architecture behind every interaction that matters. 2 things will stay with you long after this video ends. One is a question about the invisible language you speak before you ever say a word. The other is a realization about the one social habit you believe is working in your favor, but is actually costing you more trust than almost anything else you do. Stay until the final section, because both of those will fully land there. Before we go any further, if this kind of transformational intelligence is the reason you come to this channel, subscribe now and hit the like button. The Book Vault exists to give ambitious people a genuine, unfair advantage in life. The silent language of first impressions. We begin with the chapter, Leil Lowndes Calls, the silent language of first impressions, and the uncomfortable truth at its center is that you are already communicating before you have said a single word. The first pillar of this book covers what Lowndes calls the language your body speaks before your mouth ever opens, and what she reveals here is both fascinating and deeply actionable. Lowndes opens with a distinction that cuts right to the heart of social intelligence. There are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who walk into a room and say, "Well, here I am," and those who walk in and say, "Ah, there you are." That single difference, she argues, separates the people everyone gravitates toward from everyone else. The first technique in her entire toolkit is called the flooding smile, and it is deceptively simple. Most people flash an immediate grin the moment they meet someone, as if their smile is a reflex triggered by any human who enters their line of sight. Lowndes says stop doing that entirely. Instead, look at the person for 1 full second. Soak in their face. Then let a slow, warm smile gradually flood across your face and into your eyes. That brief delay, she explains, transforms the smile from an automated social habit into something that feels personal, genuine, and crafted specifically for the person standing in front of you. The psychology behind it is real. A reflexive smile signals nothing. A delayed smile signals, "You specifically made me smile." And this next realization is the exact moment everything splits into before and after. Most people believe their eye contact is strong. They believe they hold a confident gaze. But Lowndes introduces a technique she calls sticky eyes. And the moment you truly understand it, you realize how much weaker your eye contact has been than you thought. Sticky eyes means you maintain eye contact as if your gaze is held in place with warm taffy. You do not break it when the other person finishes speaking. You let it linger. You move away slowly, reluctantly. The effect is a near magnetic sense of total attention. People feel deeply seen by it, and that feeling creates trust faster than almost any other single behavior. Lowndes then introduces what she calls the big baby pivot, and it is exactly what it sounds like. When you are introduced to someone new, turn your entire body toward them with the same enthusiastic attention you would give a small child who just toddled up to you and beamed a giant smile into your face. Most people give partial pivots. They turn their heads but keep their shoulders angled away. Lowndes says that partial pivot communicates a partial interest. A full-body turn communicates, "You are very, very special to me right now." It costs nothing. It takes less than 1 second. And it leaves an impression that lingers far longer than the conversation that follows. The deeper layer most readers miss inside this first pillar is what Lowndes calls Hans's horse sense. She tells the story of clever Hans, a famous horse in the early 20th century who appeared to solve mathematical problems by tapping his hoof. Scientists eventually discovered Hans was not doing math at all. He was reading the almost imperceptible physical tension and release in the bodies of the people watching him, sensing when the crowd expected him to stop. Lowndes uses this story to make one of her most powerful points. The people in every room are doing what Hans did. They're reading your body constantly, detecting signals you are not consciously aware you are sending. And that is where most people unknowingly destroy their first impression before it has barely begun. The art of making conversation feel effortless. Moving now into the chapter titled, The Art of Making Conversation Feel Effortless, we enter territory that terrifies intelligent people more than almost anything else in social life. The blank slate panic of not knowing what to say after the initial hello. Lowndes understands this fear completely. Her entire second pillar is built around one core insight. Conversation is not about being interesting. It is about making the other person feel interesting. The moment that shift occurs inside you, the anxiety evaporates and the real skill begins. One of the most liberating techniques in this section is what Lowndes calls never the naked city. When someone asks you a basic question like, "Where are you from?" or "What do you do?" most people give a naked answer. They say the name of their city or their job title and stop there. Lowndes says every answer is a gift-wrapped invitation for conversation, and you are leaving it unwrapped on the floor. Always add a colorful detail, an unexpected angle, or a little conversational hook that gives the other person something to grab onto and pull. That hook transforms a dead-end answer into a flowing exchange. You are not performing. You are leaving doors open. You probably already believe you listen well. Most people do, but here is the truth. This book quietly presses against that belief. Lowndes introduces the technique she calls the swiveling spotlight, and its premise is simple but devastating. Imagine the conversation as a spotlight. Most people spend the entire exchange trying to angle that spotlight back onto themselves, back onto their stories, their experiences, their opinions. Big winners do the opposite. They keep the spotlight pointed at the other person. They ask follow-up questions. They lean into the other person's world. And the astonishing result is that people walk away from a conversation where you said almost nothing about yourself and describe you as one of the most fascinating people they have ever met. Lowndes also introduces a small but powerful technique called parroting, which involves repeating the last few words of what someone just said back to them as a soft question. If someone says, "I just got back from a project in Singapore," you say, "A project in Singapore?" That single echo signals genuine interest and invites them to continue without you having to manufacture a clever question. And what I'm about to tell you is the part of this book that most people never even reach. Lowndes layers these techniques together into a complete conversational system where every exchange feels natural, deep, and memorable, not because you studied scripts, but because the other person always felt heard. The psychology of sounding like an insider, we now enter the chapter titled, The Psychology of Sounding Like an Insider, and this is where Lowndes introduces one of the most psychologically sophisticated ideas in the entire book. She describes it as the difference between being an outsider trying to get in and an insider who already belongs. The third pillar is about language, not vocabulary in the academic sense, but the insider linguistic codes that every tribe, every industry, every social circle uses to signal belonging and filter out strangers. Lowndes calls this technique "be a word detective," and it changes how you approach every new room you walk into. The core idea is that every profession, every subculture, every social group has its own private language, its own jargon, its own pet phrases that signal membership. Lowndes teaches you to do your research before entering any unfamiliar world. Learn the words, learn the references, learn what the insiders laugh about and what they roll their eyes at. Not to fake belonging, but to remove the invisible friction that occurs the moment you accidentally signal outsider status. The moment you speak someone's private language, their guard drops almost immediately. Inside the vault, we call this the insider passport, the fastest entry point into any circle that matters. This is where mainstream advice collapses. Most books on networking tell you to be genuine, be curious, be yourself. And while none of that is wrong, it is dangerously incomplete. Lowndes reveals that being yourself in a room full of people who have not yet decided whether you belong there is actually a social liability until you have established enough common ground to make yourself feel familiar. The technique she calls communication captures this perfectly. Begin every appropriate sentence with the word "you," not "I think," not "I feel," not "in my experience." You. That single word redirects the psychological beam from you toward them, and people experience conversations framed around you as more engaging, more respectful, and more memorable. And then Lowndes introduces something that cuts even deeper. She calls it the exclusive smile. Most people give the same smile to everyone in a room, a broad, democratic grin distributed equally across every face. Big winners give differentiated smiles. Each person gets a smile that feels like it was made specifically for them. When you are in a group and someone is more important to your goals that evening, you reserve a deeper, warmer, slower smile just for that person. The psychology is elegant. A smile that feels exclusive feels meaningful. A smile that feels distributed feels like a courtesy you would offer a stranger on a street corner. One creates connection, the other creates nothing. But the real depth of this pillar only emerges when you understand what Lowndes calls the who's that technique. And this is the move most people never have the courage to try. Before walking into any event where you want to build real connections, you find whoever is hosting and you ask them to introduce you to a specific person you want to meet, using your name, your credentials, and a brief framing that positions you favorably. You are engineering the social context before it begins. Most people wait. They hover. They hope someone interesting will find them. Big winners pre-engineer the encounter, so the introduction does the heavy lifting before they ever say a word. The architecture of rapport and likability. We now step into the chapter Lowndes titles, The Architecture of Rapport and Likability, and what she reveals next changes how you think about trust entirely. This is where Lowndes shifts from tactics into something closer to social psychology. Building genuine rapport, she argues, is not about performing likability. It is about triggering the deeply wired human instinct that says, "This person is like me." The most powerful word in any social interaction is not interesting or impressive. It is similar. When people sense similarity, they relax. Their defenses lower. Their warmth rises. And Lowndes spends this entire section teaching you exactly how to manufacture that sense of similarity through deliberate, ethical, and effective technique. The technique called Be a Copycat, which Lowndes renames Be a Copy Class for a more elegant framing, involves subtly mirroring the posture, gestures, and energy level of the person you are speaking with, not in an obvious way, not in the way they could ever consciously detect, but in the gentle, organic way that naturally occurs between two people who are already deeply comfortable with each other. What happens when we mirror someone without their awareness is that their subconscious reads the physical similarity as evidence of psychological alignment. They do not think, "This person is copying me." They think, "This person just feels right to me." The terrifying part is that most people never notice this pattern happening to them. This next idea is the reason this book has stayed on bestseller lists for decades. Lowndes introduces what she calls Bear Their Hot Button, and it is one of the most quietly powerful rapport-building skills in the entire book. Every person on earth has a subject they are privately passionate about, something they could talk about for hours with complete joy and almost no prompting. Your job, Lowndes says, is to find that topic as quickly as possible, because the moment you bring it up, you transform from a stranger into one of the most interesting people they have ever met. You did not become more interesting. They became more engaged. And in social reality, those two things feel identical. Late at night, when everything is quiet and you put your phone down, there is a question that surfaces for ambitious people. It goes something like this: why do some people seem to walk into rooms and immediately command warmth and attention, while I work twice as hard and still feel invisible? That question has a real answer, and Lowndes locates it in a concept she calls the empathic echo. When someone shares something emotional, whether pride, frustration, excitement, or grief, the correct response is not a pivot to your own story. It is a mirrored emotional acknowledgement. You repeat the emotional core of what they said back to them before adding anything of your own. That must have felt incredible, or that sounds genuinely exhausting. 2 sentences, and the other person feels deeply understood in a way most conversations never produce. Lowndes also makes a critical distinction between praise and flattery that most people spend their entire lives confusing. Praise, she argues, is specific, earned, and targeted. It names exactly what someone did and why it mattered. Flattery is general, empty, and easily detected as manipulation. She introduces what she calls the killer compliment. One specific, sincere observation delivered privately, naming exactly what you noticed and why it impressed you. Not "you're amazing," but something more like, "The way you handled that situation in the room told me something about the way you think that I won't forget." A compliment one hears is never as powerful as the one they feel was truly seen. Working. Any room and building. Lasting influence. We arrive now at the final chapter of the strategic breakdown, titled Working Any Room and Building Lasting Influence. And this is where everything Lowndes has built comes together into what she calls the full social architecture of a big winner. If the earlier pillars gave you the individual tools, this final section teaches you how to use all of them simultaneously in the most high-stakes social environments of your life: the professional event, the networking dinner, the party where every person in that room could change the trajectory of your career. This is where most summaries skip this entirely. We will not. Lowndes introduces what she calls working a room like a politician, and the word she uses most often in this section is intentional. Most people drift through networking events. They find a comfortable person, cling to them for the evening, and leave having made exactly 0 new connections. Politicians, professional relationship builders, and elite networkers move differently. They enter with a mental map. They make deliberate contact with specific people. They deliver warmth in short, concentrated bursts. They move on cleanly, without awkwardness, leaving every person feeling better than they did before the interaction began. And they never, ever stand against a wall waiting for something to happen. She also introduces a technique called always wear a what's-it, which sounds simple but contains a sophisticated psychological principle. A what's-it is any slightly unusual accessory, pin, piece of jewelry, or item on your person that gives strangers an easy, low-risk opening to approach you. The social friction of initiating a conversation with a complete stranger is enormous for most people. A what's-it removes that friction entirely by giving the other person a ready-made conversational handle. You're not just attending the event. You are engineering your own approachability before you walk through the door. And human nature being what it is, the people who approach you because your what's-it sparked their curiosity are already primed to find you interesting before you say a word. At this point, the architecture feels complete. You have the silent language of first impressions, the effortless conversation flow, the insider vocabulary, the rapport-building mechanisms, and the politician's strategy for working any room. But just when the lesson feels fully delivered, Lowndes reveals something that redefines everything that came before it. She argues that the crown jewel of all social intelligence is not a technique. It is a single underlying truth that every trick in this book is actually a different expression of. People will do almost anything for the person who makes them feel truly special, truly seen, and truly understood. Not flattered, not impressed, seen. And the entire architecture of her 92 tricks, from the flooding smile to the killer compliment to the exclusive eye contact to the empathic echo, is one unified answer to the question: how do you make every person you meet feel like the most important person in the room? The answer is that you stop thinking about yourself long enough to actually see them. What comes next is where everything you have heard so far finally connects into something you can actually use. Key lessons and insights. The silent power of deliberate body language. The first lesson this book plants in you, and the one that changes everything else, is that your body is already speaking, loudly and constantly, and most of what it is saying is working against you. Lowndes' entire first section is built on this uncomfortable realization. The way you move, the speed of your smile, the direction of your pivot, the stillness of your hands, these are not decorative details. They are the primary data points others use to determine whether you are someone worth knowing. And this is where the first question we planted at the beginning finally lands. The invisible language you speak before you ever say a word is not a mystery. It is your body, and once you learn to read it in yourself and in others, the entire social game changes. The practical application here is immediate and deeply personal. In the next 7 days, choose one physical habit from Lowndes' system and practice it with complete intentionality. Start with a flooding smile. Every time you greet someone this week, pause for 1 full second before you let your smile emerge. Do not flash it immediately. Let it arrive slowly, as if the person in front of you specifically earned it. Watch what happens to the other person's energy when they receive that smile. Watch how the quality of the interaction shifts from the very first second. One habit, 7 days. That is the only instruction you need to begin. The conversation is not about you. The second lesson this book delivers, and the one most people intellectually understand but almost never emotionally accept, is that exceptional conversationalists are not exceptional talkers. They are exceptional listeners and exceptional question askers. Lowndes' swiveling spotlight technique is not just a social nicety. It is a complete psychological reorientation. The person who talks the least and listens the most often leaves the deepest impression because they gave the other person the rarest possible gift in a world of distracted, self-absorbed humans: their total, unhurried attention. If you leave with nothing else from this video, let it be this: the next important conversation you have, go into it with a single quiet intention. Keep the spotlight on the other person. Ask one extra question after their first answer. Echo their last words back to them as a soft question. Do not pivot to your story. Do not wait impatiently for your turn to speak. Resist that pull with everything you have. And notice what the other person says about you to someone else the next morning. It will not be that you are interesting. It will be that you are unforgettable. Insider language is the fastest door into any world. The third lesson Lowndes teaches is that language is a membership badge, and most people wear the wrong one into rooms where it matters most. The Bayard detective technique is not about faking expertise. It is about removing the unconscious friction that occurs when you signal outsider status through unfamiliar vocabulary or misplaced references. When you speak the insider language of a group, their walls come down before your credibility even comes up. This is not manipulation. It is the social equivalent of showing up to a job interview dressed appropriately. You are speaking the visual and verbal language of belonging. The Vault perspective on this is different from how most self-help books frame it. They tell you to be authentic. Lowndes tells you to be aware. Being authentically clueless in a room full of insiders is not a virtue. Doing your homework, learning the language, understanding the culture before you enter, that is the respectful act. It says you took the people in that room seriously enough to prepare, and the irony is that the person who prepares most carefully to fit into a new environment is often the person who feels most naturally at home there once they arrive. Similarity creates trust faster than anything else. The fourth lesson is drawn directly from Lowndes' Rapport architecture, and it is the reason the Be a Copy class and the empathic echo techniques are so psychologically effective. Human beings are hardwired to trust similarity. When your posture mirrors theirs, when your energy matches theirs, when your emotional response echoes theirs, their subconscious reads all of that as evidence of alignment, safety, and belonging. You are not building trust through impressive arguments or compelling stories. You are building it through the quiet, below-the-surface language of sameness. The application of this lesson is subtle but powerful. Before your next important meeting, conversation, or interview, take 30 seconds to study the energy of the person you are about to engage with. Are they formal or relaxed, fast-paced or deliberate, warm or reserved? Then consciously choose to enter their energy register rather than imposing your own. This is not weakness. It is precision. The diplomat who enters every country speaking the local social language does not lose identity. They gain access. And access is where all influence begins. Make people feel seen, and they will never forget you. The fifth and final lesson is the deepest current running beneath every technique in this book. Remember the question we opened with about the 2-second pause before the smile and whether something that small could genuinely change how people experience you? The answer is yes, and here is why. Because that pause communicates one thing above all others. It says, I see you specifically, not generically, not automatically, not out of social reflex. But you specifically in this moment are worth my full attention. And in a world where most people feel chronically unseen, that single message, delivered through body language, eye contact, mirrored emotion, or a well-placed killer compliment, is the most powerful social force that exists. This is the realization that lands differently once you truly absorb it. Every technique in Leil Lowndes' system is, at its core, a different method of delivering that one message. Most summaries skip this entirely. They list the tricks and move on. What they miss is the heart underneath the architecture, which is that none of these techniques work as manipulative shortcuts. They work because they are expressions of genuine attention, and genuine attention is the rarest and most valuable thing one human being can offer another. The big winners Lowndes describes are not performers. They are people who learn to give their full presence to whoever is in front of them. That is the whole game. The vault closing. This book is not really about conversation. It is about one of the deepest human needs that exists, the need to feel that someone else genuinely sees us. Leil Lowndes spent decades in boardrooms, seminars, and government agencies watching people interact, and what she kept finding was the same pattern everywhere. The people who commanded the most loyalty, the deepest trust, and the most meaningful connections were not the most impressive people in the room. They were the most present, the most deliberately attentive, the ones who walked in asking, "Who is here?" rather than, "Who is watching me?" Your specific action for the next 7 days is this. Practice the flooding smile in every new greeting. Practice the swiveling spotlight in every conversation, and identify one group, one professional circle, or one social world you want to enter and spend 30 minutes this week learning its language before you step inside. 3 behaviors, 7 days. Not all 92 true tricks at once, just 3, because the person who masters 3 of Lowndes' principles and applies them consistently will outperform the person who memorizes all 92 and applies none. Knowledge that does not change your behavior is just entertainment. And that second thing we planted at the beginning of this video, the one social habit you believe is working in your favor but is actually costing you trust, it is the automatic smile. The reflexive, universal, everybody gets it grin that you deploy the moment any human comes into view. It costs you credibility because it signals that the smile belongs to the situation, not to the person. Fix that one habit this week and watch how the quality of your first impressions transforms. This is the Book Vault, the place where serious people come to get serious knowledge. If this masterclass gave you something real, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your single biggest takeaway in the comments below. Every ambitious person who finds their way here becomes part of a community that refuses to stay average. Welcome to the Vault.